Welcome to But Jesus Drank Wine.
and other stories that kept us stuck. I'm Mead,
And I'm Christy.
and in this podcast, we'll explore the stories that kept us, well, stuck, wanting to drink and not wanting to drink all at the same time.
Join us as we show you that freedom from alcohol does not have to mean a life sentence of misery and missing out.
But actually means living an authentic life full of peace, joy, and purpose. Welcome to the But Jesus Drank Wine podcast. Mead here with you today to introduce to you our very special episode, our conversation with our friends Blake Roberts and Jamie Haigh. They are the hosts of 3%, a podcast and brand that helps men turn emotional walls into healthier relationships and find strength and vulnerability in faith. As therapists, friends, dads, and husbands, Jamie and Blake have been in the trenches themselves, and now they're creating a unique space for men to have honest conversations and access practical tools that go beyond the therapy office. 8 years ago, they met in 12-step recovery and stumbled on an idea that changed their lives. At best, most men are 97% honest with themselves and others, but it's that last 3%, the stuff that feels too shameful, too vulnerable, too real, that keeps us stuck. They're all about helping men bring that last 3% into the light so they can experience real freedom and connection with themselves, God, and others. Each week on the podcast, they sit down with leaders in psychology, theology, the arts, and sports for honest, practical conversations about what it means to be a holistic man. And we just loved connecting with these guys because we have similar missions of helping people from the things that are keeping them stuck, vulnerability being a necessary component of getting unstuck, whether you're on the freedom from alcohol journey or you're just on a journey of growth and wellness and sanctification in the Lord. Whether you're man or woman, vulnerability is key to getting unstuck. And so we loved having a chat with these guys from a place of that unique perspective they have as husbands, as therapists, as dads, as friends, as men. And we chat about all the things that we would chat about from a female perspective, but better understand the important men in our lives. So whether it's your husband, your brother, your son, your friend, your dad, we all have men in our lives that are important to us. And we thought it would just be a really relevant conversation to hear from their perspective. Like, how do we connect with the men in our lives in a healthy way that allows for them to be vulnerable with us? How do we support our guys without rescuing or pressuring them? How do we foster honest conversations in our marriages? And so you'll hear all of that and more as we chat today. So without further ado, please enjoy our conversation with Blake and Jamie. So, y'all, we have our friends here with us. Blake and Jamie have joined us. Blake and Jamie are from the 3% podcast, and they are both husbands and therapists, and they've become friends of ours. And we just invited them to come and chat. Our listeners will have remembered Blake's episode from where Blake shared his story and kind of what led him to doing the work that he does now. And we thought we missed Jamie in that conversation. So we wanted to include Jamie in that conversation now and chat around all the things from your unique perspective as husbands and therapists as related to just emotional wellness for men and women, around a connection, all the things. So would y'all first just kind of give us a little intro of yourselves?
Yeah, you go first. They
Little
kind of
background.
know me a
They
little
kind of
bit.
know who you
You're more
are
interesting
at
anyway.
length now. Yeah, okay. My name's Jamie. I am a therapist in Middle Tennessee area. I specialize in addiction, primarily sex addiction with men, but I work in a more rural area. So I have substance addiction of every flavor right now in my practice. I've been married it'll be 10 years this year. I have a 3.5-year-old son and a almost 1-year-old daughter. She turns 1 this month. My wife is actually she does the same thing Blake's wife does. She's a middle school youth pastor at a church here in town. And we've had an interesting journey walking through addiction, her and I. So I'm interested and excited to talk about addiction from the perspective of the husband and the wife today, and the trials and tribulations that come along with that.
So cool. So y'all like live the same life pretty much,
It's
right?
really
Like,
weird, actually.
It's become more of that over time. So we met in 12-step and for sex addiction. And we became really tight friends really quickly through that, but we were doing very disparate things at the time. I was crew leading a residential tree service. I was climbing and cutting down trees over people's houses. And
I was managing an art gallery.
yeah, so it definitely used to be more different than it is now. We kind of both found our way to being therapists in the last 5 years.
Yeah. And our wives were already doing the same thing at different churches 15 minutes down the road from each other before we met. So
Right.
that was kind of really wild.
Only God, only
Right.
God.
Yeah, yeah. And both of us have a daughter named Charlotte.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That was
That is
not
wild.
intentional. Yeah, we like already had our names set, but we call ours our Charlotte's nickname is Lottie and theirs is Charlie. So at least we can differentiate the two
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
that's so,
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
So was
lots of
it,
overlap.
yeah, so y'all met in recovery, and then where did the stories come together and the idea for doing what you're doing now?
As we got into our journey of becoming therapists, we both knew that we're both entrepreneurial, and we knew that we wanted to do something together, and we thought it was going to look like a marketing and design business for therapists because it's a very felt need, designing websites, things like that. Went to a cabin. We were going to plan that retreat, or we were going to plan that business out. Ended up feeling this really, I think we both had been feeling it, but we started talking about this small tug, or the still small voice that was leading us away from that and more toward, I think at the time it was more just, we want to help men. This became more clear when we were starting 3%, but I think it was these murmurings of like, how can we take the best of what we've experienced in 12-step, in church growing up, men's groups, in our therapy practices, and combine them to create spaces and resources for men to experience deeper connection with themselves. So there was lots of conversation, but it was probably about 2.5 years of talking about it before we were like, okay, here's what we're going to start with, a podcast. Let's start there.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of detail within that, but that's kind of the 30,000-foot view of it.
Yeah. And the 3% idea
Yeah.
is that we kind of noticed in ourselves that even in 12-step, at our very best, we were 97% honest. And it was the 3% that we were keeping to ourselves that was binding us to shame and loneliness. The 3% of needs, wounds, desires, behaviors. And it was inflaming our addiction to keep those things to ourselves. Not only our addiction, but the way we showed up in our marriages, all of that. So we started calling each other, and it's funny, we don't even remember who came up with this idea. It just feels like it happened in our friendship, but we would call each other, and instead of saying, hey, I'm terrified to talk to you about this, I really need you to be kind and gracious and compassionate. I need you to hold space for me. We just started calling and saying, hey, I need to share my 3% with you.
Because once you
It's
understand the
good.
concept
So good.
of
Yeah.
it, it does it communicates so many things in, hey, I need to share 3%. And so it became like a permission slip for us to be really honest, really vulnerable with each other and with our wives and with our friends. And we started talking about it with clients, and they started using it in their lives. Even as we were thinking of, what are we going to call this thing? One day we're like, oh, it's right in front of us, 3%.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of just been, we have lots of dreams and visions around what we'll offer in the future, but it's really built on these, I would say, these two core pillars of vulnerability and honesty.
Right.
Because the lack of that is what drove us into our addiction and kept us there.
Yeah. vulnerability and honesty, starting with honesty with self.
Yeah.
That can then lead to honesty with others and hopefully deepen your relationship with yourself, others, and God.
So good. I feel like I know that's something that's so hard for people to do, to be honest with themselves, to be vulnerable with other people. We build our self-protective walls and whatnot to protect against being wounded and things like that, or have a history of having been wounded. And so we built those walls. I just got a coaching call. It's hard to be vulnerable. And this is a group of women that like we're connected.
Mm.
Why it seems like it's a lot harder for men. Why is
Good
that?
assumption.
Yeah, right.
It is. Yeah.
I think there's so many reasons for that. And even we talk about in 3% that we don't want to tell you the man that you need to be. We want to help you understand what gets in the way of being the man that you want to be. I don't think there's one clear reason, to me at least. I think there were different reasons for either of us that why vulnerability and honesty are difficult. And a lot of those stem from even attachment wounds of what does it mean if you're going to be honest? What did that look like when you were a kid? To be honest, what was the reaction from your primary caregivers? Then compound that with, have you experienced trauma, and what did that trauma teach you about what it is to be honest?
Yeah.
But I would say in general for men, on top of that, I think those are more of a primary foundation, and those are actually, I think, what we want to get to. Because I think if you look at just cultural norms for men, then everyone could use it as an excuse of, well, I'm not honest because men aren't allowed to be honest. And like,
Which is true.
that's true, but that's not the reason you're not honest as a guy. I think the reason you're not honest is because maybe you've experienced generational trauma, and maybe your dad didn't know how to be honest, or your mom, depending on what your attachment figure looked like. And so you learned from them what it is when your honesty is brought into what's supposed to be a safe space. And so then what does a safe space mean for you? And did you just learn that those things needed to be internalized? I do think there were a lot of social messages, especially the generations before us, that men need to just suck it up and pull themselves up by their bootstraps and get through it, because that's what it means to be a caregiver. And I also think that those messages are generational, maybe even more than they are gendered.
Yeah. Are you guys familiar with Gabor Mate?
Yeah.
So he has this video that I show clients a lot, and where he talks about that a lot of children are forced with the tragedy, he calls it, of having to choose between authenticity and attachment. And it's a really great video. I can send it to you guys. And
yeah, we'd love to put it in our show notes.
It like makes a lot of sense if you resonate with it. But kind of to what Jamie was saying, at this core foundation, like if I were to say why men have a hard time being emotional, if I'm thinking about myself, I'm thinking about my clients, again, to what you said, it's largely because before even the social norms got put in place, it's my parents didn't know how to be emotional. And so when I was emotional, they didn't know what to do with the emotion in themselves. And so they changed or tried to control me and my behavior, which really was an attempt for them to control the emotion that they didn't know what to do with. So then I learned, okay, that emotion's not good. That emotion's bad.
Right.
Sadness, not good, because my dad said, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Because he didn't know what to do with my sadness because it triggered stuff in him, and then back to the generational thing. And so we have to, for a lot of men and women, but since we're talking about men, they have to choose between this attachment with their caregiver instead of being able to be authentic with the emotion or the experience or the thoughts that they're having. And parents don't do this, some do it intentionally, but a lot of times it's like subconscious that they aren't realizing that they're making their kid choose that and we need like attachment to survive, especially in those younger years, just because all the parts of our brain that aren't developed and we don't have the tools. So we have to, like 10 times out of 10, we'll let go of that gut feeling and choose this attachment. And we don't need to get too deep into the weeds, but the other tragedy of that is the attachment that we're choosing is not even really good attachment. If
Right.
I have to reject part of myself in order to feel
Yes.
safe with you, it's not really healthy attachment. And so then that just plays out in our lives and our addictions, but also in our relationships where we are finding ourselves in these relationships or these patterns that aren't really healthy. But to our system, it's no, this is good because this is what I'm used to. And so it's this whole unwinding process of being able to realize that, but also learning how to, Gabor says, to know what you're feeling, be attuned to your gut instinct, and lead with that, and realize that even if somebody isn't okay with that, you're going to be okay because it's different now than it was when you were younger. But there's a lot
Really
we could
good.
get into.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
about that.
I love it. These are the areas that fascinate me.
Mm.
And it's so relatable to women too. I see a lot of my story in that too, like just caregivers who are coping with their distress and not equipped, and then how that creates in us when our brains are developing and where that goes from there. I'm curious about, and then I would love to get that kind of like husband therapist perspective for our ladies when it comes to starting a journey of freedom from whatever unhealthy habit or drug or substance or whatever that is keeping us stuck. I'm curious because I hear men not wanting to do emotions, but largely because it's not masculine, right? Like what's that balance? How do y'all define masculinity? And I think you said that on a different podcast, Blake. I think I heard you say something about holistic masculinity.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
language we use with 3%.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, I work in a pretty rural area,
Mhm.
and I think something that I hear a ton is, I can't talk about that because that's soft.
Mhm.
And that makes me weak too.
Yeah.
But I think the best way to navigate that is curiosity. How does that serve you to believe that a part of you that is as real of a sense? There's a therapist named Dr. John Cox. He says, feelings are just the sixth sense. They're as real of a sense to you as your sense of sight or your sense of hearing or your sense of taste. And to decide that that one sense is somehow soft denies a part of your understanding of the world.
Cool.
And so if you can allow yourself the curiosity with, maybe it's yourself, maybe it's your spouse who's saying that those parts of me are weak or soft, then you can say, okay, help me understand where that came from.
Hmm.
And can you help me understand how it serves you
Mhm.
to operate with feelings being soft? How does that keep you safe? How do you see that making your relationships better? How do you see that making your relationship with yourself better? How do you see that bringing more joy into your life? And it's actually a style of therapy called motivational interviewing. It's where you approach it from aligning with the person rather than,
Yeah.
you don't have to put yourself in the seat of proving to them why you're right and they're wrong. Maybe it'd be more helpful to align with them because their defensiveness is an attempt to keep themselves safe from what they deem as scary, not what they deem as wrong.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
if you can align with it and have curiosity towards it, which is a big part of Blake's style of practice, which is called internal family systems.
Yeah.
You can align with that part to have curiosity around it. Maybe you can learn to befriend that part. And in so doing, maybe you don't rupture from the person you're trying to care about, even if that person's you.
how many times do we say the word curiosity on our podcast? It's all about being curious. When we open to curiosity, it turns that upper part of our brains on, takes us from that emotional place and turns us back to a place of more clear thinking. And the invitation into that, I think, is really cool. So for the dude and for the ladies, the benefit of this work, like what are the things that you have noticed in your own lives of being able to share your 3% with people? Why would anyone want to do this kind of work?
Because I had an initial response and it feels very strong, but it is connected to my story. The initial thing that I heard when you said that is because being lonely could kill you.
Mm.
And I can't remember if I shared it on this show in my episode, but like I had a suicide attempt in high school, and I'm not going to chalk it up to, oh, I was lonely and that's what it led to. And there was for sure loneliness within myself and within the people around me because nobody truly knew me and I didn't really truly know myself. And that at a point, all the things aligned and all of the feelings and emotions that I didn't know what to do with and that I was holding myself were just too much. And so that felt like the option. In a sense, like I do believe that. And I know, I mean, we know people who if you're in 12-step recovery long enough, you're going to know somebody who loses their life.
Right.
Because of getting lost in the addiction and the loneliness of nobody knew where that person really was. Because we need to be known, like we are made to be known at our core, but it's hard to be known if we don't take the risk of being seen. Sharing the 3% has helped me not just not be lonely, but I think historically I would have thought that whatever my 3% is something that I need to share so that I can then get rid of that thought or that behavior or that desire and then experience happiness.
Yeah.
That's what I like originally would have thought about it. But now it's not something that I need to get rid of, and I'm not sharing it with Jamie or with my wife or with somebody to get rid of it so then I can just be happy, but I share it because it like brings me into a deeper connection and intimacy with myself, with that person and with God that I really do think that my soul was made for.
Wow. Yeah, it's how we're wired to be. Imagine stepping into a vibrant, warm community where faith, friendship, and freedom from alcohol all come together. That's exactly what you'll experience in the But Jesus Drank Wine community.
Each week, our members gather for connection calls that feel like a breath of fresh air, a time to share, grow, and support one another.
With an encouraging leadership team, a dedicated prayer request space, and connection opportunities in every time zone, you don't have to walk this journey alone.
Plus, we bring you masterclasses with expert guests, optional book clubs and Bible studies, and so much more.
And for those ready to go even deeper, we offer a small group coaching space called The Missing Piece. With weekly recorded coaching calls, it's a supportive place for women committed to breaking free from alcohol.
We're here to hold space for sober and sober-curious women who love Jesus or are eager to reconnect with him. Wherever you are on your path, you'll feel seen, supported, and strengthened here.
As one member described, quote, "The BJDW community is unique because there's a connection between faith and freedom from alcohol that I haven't been able to find in any other online space or through my church."
Ready to join the sisterhood? Head over to butjesusdrankwine.com/community or click the link in the show notes to learn more. We can't wait to meet you.
And the insidious part of addiction is how disconnecting how it perpetuates the disconnection.
Yeah.
And I'll say this real quick. I grew up in church my whole life, and there was a language or like a an encouragement to share. They wouldn't have used this language, but like to share your 3% with God. God wants to know where you're at.
Mhm.
God wants to know. He already knows, and so take those things to him. And I believe in that, but I wasn't ever really modeled how to do that with another person.
Yeah.
And if in some ways, like my perception of God was so distorted that like, I wasn't even bringing my 3% to him, or even when I did, what I felt like his posture was toward me was like, not really, truly is. And so I think that's why we're so big on sharing it with another physical person, that their attunement to you or their response to you can be like a physical manifestation of that encounter with God that sometimes
Yeah.
can be difficult to experience just with yourself, especially if you have a complicated relationship with faith, which a lot of us do.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm making that fit. The 30,000 foot, what he's looking at me, that knowing look, is I was abused by a youth pastor for 8 years. So
Mm.
I
Yeah.
have and now I'm married to a youth pastor. So I have a interesting and complicated relationship with faith that I think is richer now than it ever has been. But that came at the
Mm.
doing the work, sharing the 3%. I think, to your question, what do you see as the benefit of sharing your 3%? There's a lot of research that would suggest that addiction is a problem of disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mhm.
the solution is new and safe connection.
Okay.
And if attachment is the way that I relate to others based on my relationship with primary caregivers or abusers when I was young, well, then the solution is going to be to create new safe attachments with people in adulthood.
Mm.
And if I can't share my 3% in those relationships in adulthood, then what kind of attachment relationship am I creating? And so, how do I see it playing out and being important in our lives? If I'm being vulnerable with you, I think that my relationship with my addiction is only healing because of sharing my 3% with Blake, and then finding the courage in a safe relationship with him to share it with my wife and to share it with God in a very real way. I think that my relationship with my wife has changed drastically because she fully knows me and loves me,
Mm.
and that's changed our sex life. That's changed our emotional engagement with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think that my relationship in church has completely changed because I can't have a relationship with God where I'm only bringing 97% of myself to him at my
Mhm.
best. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's an area that it won't touch.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard to have the courage. This is what's very difficult about it, is that at each place where you want it to impact and affect your life, you have to have the courage to use it in that place. And that
Ooh, that's good.
at every point,
Yep.
that doesn't get easier because it's a form of exposure therapy to it.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you get to a new place in your life where you're like, oh, shoot, I think somebody's going to reject me if they know this about me.
Yeah.
That's a new place where your body has to learn that you're safe now, where maybe you weren't safe historically. If you have an attachment to somebody that is safe now, you are teaching your body every time you share that 3% with somebody that you aren't abiding by the insecure attachment of your childhood. You're living by the secure attachment that you're choosing now.
I was just thinking about the women who are listening and they're hearing this and they want this kind of opportunity for their husbands, right? But like them going, hey, I think you need to listen to this podcast. Or the women that they're undoing they're stuck in a drinking cycle and they're working hard to find freedom from alcohol, and they've been drinking buddies with their husband and their husband's not on the same journey. I'm thinking about those gals. So from your perspective, how would you encourage them to get the 3% out? Sharing. Yes. Yeah.
That was my
Thank you.
question.
Yes. Perfect.
Your question, Chris,
From their
is like how
husbands.
to encourage them to get the 3% out of their husbands.
Yeah.
I think it's important to recognize in yourself. I think there's the first layer, which is this is someone you love and you want them to experience the same thing you're experiencing.
Mhm.
And I think it's courageous for everyone who's listening, who's trying to stop drinking. That's courageous, full stop.
Yeah.
And you want your partner to have the courage with you.
Yeah.
And good for you.
Yeah.
And I also think there's probably something in your story that has led you to the place where you are, because you are making a change. You're wanting your partner to make the change too. And that says something about your attachment to them. It's going to first necessitate you creating safe relationships elsewhere
Mhm.
so that you can develop your 3%, so that you are not coming to your spouse who's not at the same place as you and saying, I will only feel safe if you feel safe to me. I hope that they come with you there. I really do hope that they join you in the journey. And I also think that there's a real gift of desperation that has to happen for everybody. And 3% really is a byproduct of desperation,
Mm,
not a byproduct of showing somebody how they're wrong.
Mhm.
that's good.
It breaks my heart for all the people who are listening, who are trying to do that. And I want to normalize that that's very difficult and something that comes to our practices.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But again, it's for me, the way that I approach it is curiosity for the person who's still drinking about, like, how do you see this serving us long term?
Mhm.
But I also
Mhm.
think that for a while, if they want to maintain their solution to their pain, then every time you come to them saying, I need you to stop medicating your pain, they're not hearing, hey, I want you to feel better. They're
Yeah.
hearing, I want to take away your solution to how you feel in pain.
Mhm.
And that's where the defensiveness is going to come from. And they may have no idea that that's how they feel. But I have not met an alcoholic yet who that's not how they felt.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to require patience. I think it's going to require other safe relationships for you, and probably more patience.
It is sad, and in the sense like that I want, like I have. I feel like I could say this on air. Maybe
You go for it.
some of the more difficult clients that I work with are the ones who come to therapy and then they're like, wow, my wife told me I need to come here.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, here we go.
Right.
Because
I
I'm
think
not,
that's the majority of the people, like husbands that I coach.
yep. And it's,
Yeah.
and it's, and I'm not saying that that's hopeless because I have had clients that have come in that in that place. Like my wife told me to come here. I don't really know why. I don't know why I'm doing like a deep Southern accent. My wife told me to come here, and I don't really know why I'm here. And they're just angry at the partner for wanting them to be here and all this stuff. And that's not hopeless because I have seen those clients change.
Sure.
Does it take a lot longer than somebody who recognizes fully, hey, I need this and I'm taking this step for me? Yes, it does. I have clients that will come like with a list of like, my wife wanted me to talk about this in therapy. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
And it's just really difficult work because it's like, why are you here? Like are you here for you? Or are you just here because you think it will make your wife happy? Because that's also not really going back to the attachment
Yeah.
conversation. That's not healthy attachment, and that's not even what you guys are wanting. And so it does make me sad in the sense of I do want to just grab. My initial reaction is like I want to grab the men and be like, dude, wake up. Do you not see what this is doing to your family? And as I'm saying that and clenching my fists, I'm recognizing that that is my story. That is my father? Do you not see, after all of these times and all these situations and all of this pain and all of these lost relationships, like, how have you not hit your bottom yet, so to speak? Because that's, everybody's got to, it takes what it takes. And I do believe that is sort of true, but at least one of my hopes with 3% is not that we would rescue a guy from their bottom, but maybe at least help them a little bit before they get there.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
if you find your way listening to this show or this episode, and we say something that speaks into something that you don't even know is there, maybe, because I had that like early in my recovery journey, like somebody hearing something and I'm like, oh, that connects with something in me. And I didn't even know that was there, but you put language to it and that helped me.
Yeah.
So I think there
Yep.
is a way, and maybe we could talk about this in our, whenever we come hang out with your community, like there is a way probably to share an episode with your spouse or something in a way that is connecting and not, hey, listen to this men's mental health podcast because you need help. There is a way to do that, like Jamie said, with curiosity. And I always come back to vulnerability breeds vulnerability. And the more that we lead with what is working for us and what is helpful for us, people are attracted to that. Like if I'm saying to a friend, like, hey man, I really think you need to go see somebody and start working on some stuff, there's going to be resistance there. But if I'm like, hey, I remember what it was like when I was in that place and I started seeing a therapist and this happened and that is attractive. It's not manipulative. It's just like I'm sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And that is.
Yeah, I think we got to be careful not to weaponize our vulnerability.
Yeah.
Started going to AA and it's really been changing my life. I think you need to be doing it too.
Right. Yeah.
We got to be so careful around shaming someone into change. I think what it comes down to for most of the people I work with who are the spouse of someone who's still in active addiction is, what do your boundaries look like? Do your boundaries look like you're going to only be okay when they change? Or do your boundaries look like I'm going to maintain safety regardless of whether you change?
Mm-hmm.
Because my recovery is too important for me to be dependent upon your ability to meet me where I'm going.
Mm.
And so there is a lot of hope, I think, in looking at self and not looking at our partner who we love deeply, who we want to feel freedom, who we want to change with us. But if we're dependent upon them for our hope and healing to take place, then we'll stop looking at ourselves and see what hope and healing can take place even within us. So if your boundary, I think the people who are coming to us who are like, my wife told me to be here, normally I start with, hey, I'm sorry that that's the boundary that your spouse has had with you. And I've had that, male and female. I'm sorry that that's the boundary that your spouse has had with you, because that's not actually a boundary. That's saying you have to do this or else I'm gone. And what that boundary really needs to be is like, hey, I hope that you'll do some work on yourself. I'm letting you know that when you act in these behaviors, I'm not going to allow my safety to be dictated by your behavior.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a lot of hope in that, in learning that you have agency regardless of the lack of safety going on around you. And that's kind of what I was getting at with what's in your story. Are you trying to create safety with your partner so that you can feel safety where you are? Because when there wasn't safety with your attachment figures as a kid, you didn't feel safe where you were. Well, you're an adult now. You get to choose safety. Mm-hmm. You have agency now. And so whether the person you love dearly chooses to join you in that safety doesn't get to dictate anymore whether you get to have safety for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good.
I love how you pointed to the hope in it, and the curiosity that I think is an invitation. We always leave our listeners with like a tiny new action for, they take these topics and then like, what do we do with this? So like a tiny Tina that just came to me from this is just the curiosity around, if I want my spouse to join me in this journey, what in me, what in my story is part of that? What is the need that I'm looking to be met? Where do I have opportunity with in a different space? And then how could that influence what he does? And it not to be manipulative, but just in a way that is hopeful and not forced.
Right.
Not forced.
I want-
Yeah.
Last thing, and I'm saying this like being mindful, there is no, a wife's role is not to be like their husband's mom or their husband's therapist. But what I was realizing is like so many men are really just like little boys walking around in adult bodies. And so I'm thinking of when you're talking about boundaries and like your son is like hitting you, I'm not going to shame him for hitting me, but I am going to set a boundary of, hey, we're not going to hit mom like that, or we're not going to hit dad like that, but we're going to be curious about what's going on. And so maybe if that's just like something to remember, again, not saying it's your job to like treat him like you would your kid, because that can create a different dynamic, but recognizing that when we are in these places, we're really just like these little kids in adult
addictions are a
bodies.
young behavior.
Yep, 100%.
So good. Thank y'all both for this time and for blessing our listeners with your wisdom and your stories and just the good work you're doing in the world. And yeah, just thank you.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
for
us.
having us. Yeah, this is awesome.
Thanks, guys. And we'll link everything in the show notes for where you can find Blake and Jamie and the 3% Pod. Bye, y'all. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us again this week. You can find all of our episodes at butjesusdrinkwine.com, and be sure to follow us over on Instagram, Love Life Sober, and I'm Not Sober, I'm Free.
To learn more about what we do, you can visit our websites, meethollandshirley.com and lovelifesober.com.
Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it with a friend or two.
And don't forget to subscribe to our pod so you don't have to worry about missing a single episode. And if you love what we're doing, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify.
This helps more women who are feeling stuck and alone in the overdrinking cycle find hope and encouragement.
Thanks, ladies. We so appreciate you, and we'll see you next Monday.